Alright, so everyone gets a craving for a good steak or barbecue. We just can't help ourselves. But what happens when that craving gets totally supersized? And I mean like
25 pounds of meat supersized.
Well, your cravings and dreams are about to be answered. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode here at Time Out Kitchen, where today I'll be showing you another version of traditional Argentine barbecue, also known as asado. In this video, I'll be showing you a version which is blown to absolute supersized proportions, and to that end, this is Oscar. Okay, no, this is actually called Costillar a la Cruz, which poorly translated means ribs on a cross, and involves a large slab of meat, in this case about 25 pounds of beef ribs, which will be slowly and lovingly cooked over an open flame for many hours to eventually feed a small army, or in my case, one side of my immediate family. Now, typically when you think of Argentine barbecue, you are thinking of asado, where various meats are placed over hot hardwood coals and cooked to absolute perfection. Cooking a la cruz, or on the cross, is a more rustic and traditional version used by the gauchos, where a large metal cross holds an equally large piece of meat, which then leans precariously over an open flame and cooks for several hours until smoky, tender, and delicious. Oh, and if you aren't familiar with the gauchos, just think South American cowboys. Yeehaw! Anyways, to start, you're gonna need meat, and a lot of meat, and today I'll be cooking with this 25-pound rack of beef ribs, which as you can see is indeed a lot of meat, but don't worry, we will be putting this to good use. At first glance, this has some really good marbling and good overall thickness, and you actually might notice something when you look a little bit closer, and that is that there's 3 lines going through the bones. Now, I've had the butcher score the bones to help with seasoning, cook time, and making this whole thing easier to serve. Importantly, this cut does not go through the meat, just the bone, and while these cuts aren't exactly mandatory, they are going to really be useful and practical. But if you want a full rib bone to yourself and don't mind some extra cook time, then you can just ignore me. Oh, and if you're wondering, no, you do not need to trim the fat cap here. This will help protect the meat from the fire and render out and make a super tasty and tender final product. Okay, so let's talk seasoning. Now, unlike a lot of barbecue styles, Argentinian barbecue does not really use much in the way of seasoning. No sauces, no special marinades, it's just usually a very generous layering of salt. Now, with such a large chunk of meat, we can expect a long cook time, and that means we can't be using some basic ass table salt. No, my friends, what we need is the nearly impossible to find super special salt found deep within the Andes Mountains called Sal de Parrilla, which is basically just a smaller version of coarse salt, which means kosher salt is gonna work just fine. Anyways, with your not so special salt in hand, you want to liberally, and I mean liberally, coat each side of your ribs and make sure to press the salt down with your hands so it doesn't get any wild ideas about not staying put. So with the ribs aggressively seasoned, we're going to need to think about the next step, which is going to be how we cook this damn thing. So with that in mind, it's time to build a fire. Now, you could do this over an open fire pit out in a field somewhere, but we're very fancy here, so naturally we're going to use this rusted out hunk of metal with a notch to insert the cross. We've also got this lovely torture device looking thing, which holds our 25-pound meat baby, aka Oscar, and a small little grill, all of which will fit nicely into this single meat grilling station. So to set this up, force your family member to grab a rusty piece of metal and simply jam it into place. There we go, perfect. Now, this little contraption is the anchor, and as you can see, it has several notches, which will allow us to actually adjust the angle of the cross closer or further from our heat source, which basically means it's a primitive way to control our cooking temperature. With the first part of our cross in place, it is time to build a fire. Again, as this is potentially dangerous work, I'll be forcing my family member to do the dirty work for me. And listen, don't judge me, I'm on vacation. But if you don't have someone who can do the work for you, just grab some paper, roll it up, and put it into some loose crumpled balls. Then grab yourself some dry kindling, perhaps something that looks a little like these right here, and build yourself a nice little teepee style base for the fire using the kindling before adding a few slightly larger pieces over top. Now, you might be wondering why we haven't started this fire, and that's actually because we need to quickly go inside and make ourselves some delicious meat juice. Okay, this is actually called Sal Muera, which is basically a briny liquid we're going to use to add some flavor and keep Oscar nice and moist. So to make this, you'll want to grab your paprika and some chili powder, ideally a spicy one. Then you'll want a couple of large cloves of garlic and of course an excessive amount of salt. Now you can feel free to change out the spices I've chosen, but salt is a must. However, this full-bodied red wine is not necessary but does add a ton of flavor and color. Once you've gathered all the key players, you'll want to grab your fancy spritz bottle that you totally have, or if you want to be a peasant like me, a clean plastic bottle to which we will poke a few holes in. Now, as you might imagine, to put this together, we're just going to put everything here in the bottle, so just grab your garlic and proceed to give it a good smash. Then just repeat this process for the other 8 to 10 cloves and just huck those things right in the bottle, skins and all. Then grab your hyper-sophisticated funnel, and no, that's definitely not paper I pulled from a nearby notebook, and then pour in around 3 to 4 tablespoons of paprika, followed by equal parts chili powder. After that, add about 6 to 7 tablespoons of salt, and to that you're going to then add your wine. Anywhere from about a half a cup is fine, but you can use a full bottle if you'd like. Now for the finishing touch, you'll want to grab some hot but not boiling water and carefully add that into your bottle. Then secure the lid on and give this a good shake. And there, my friends, you have your very own Sal Muera. Now the last step here is to poke a few holes into the top of the bottle, but before we get to that, we need to get our meat ready. And for that, you're going to need this. Our appropriately sized meat cage, which is a bit dirty, so I'm gonna go clean my hands and give this a quick wipe down. With that done, place Oscar gently into his new home. Now, you'll notice some hooks at the top, and all I'm doing is trying to have those hooks fit between the ribs. Ideally, the second or third topmost ribs. This will help maximize our stability and make sure that this thing doesn't just fall into the fire. With that done, it is time to secure Oscar into his new home. Now, luckily, this thing comes fully equipped with metal bars that just clip in like that really crappy piece of equipment at your local gym. So once you've got all 3 rusty straps securely in place, this thing is now fully secured and ready for our fire. Now, I've got to walk about 20 feet to the fire outside, but if like me you think that's too far to carry 25 pounds of meat and about 15 pounds of metal, then put your strapping young family member to work. The whole thing weighs around 40 pounds and it is a bit awkward to get into position, but you want to get the stem of the cage into the anchor point. Then we're going to drop this down into prime cooking position, which is about a foot or so from our heat source. With Oscar in place, it's finally time to light our fire and get the party started. Thanks to our expert fire building skills and the wood being extra dry due to it being around 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit for you American folks, this thing is going to light really quickly. Once we've got a good flame, we're going to add a few pieces of our hardwood, and this isn't just any old hardwood. This is quebracho, which according to my 9th grade research skills is the hardest wood in the world because premium meat deserves premium wood. Anyways, dendrology, or tree science as I call it, aside, this hardwood is not only going to keep our fire going, but provide an amazing smoky flavor for our ribs. Now, if we take a closer look at this whole setup, there are a couple things to point out. The first, which I've already mentioned, is that this is a lot of meat and you're going to need a lot of time to cook. And what that means is we're going to need a lot of wood. So make sure you've got ample amounts on standby. Second, and very importantly, is that this long cook time means your meat is going to be exposed to a heat source for a long time. So you want to protect it by mainly cooking it with the bone side down. In my case, I cooked about 70% of the time on the bone side and about 30% on the meat side. The other thing that will help both to keep things from drying out and adding flavor is going to be our Sal Muera, or fancy meat juice. So after 40 minutes, we're going to go ahead and add this on and let it sit for around 2 to 3 minutes before giving this whole thing a flip. Yes, Oscar's prison does flip around, just be careful because this thing is hot. You can see the amazing color and marbling in the meat and how the fire and smoke are beginning to penetrate the flesh. Once flipped, give this another quick douse of our meat juice. Now, unsurprisingly, you'll repeat this process over and over, usually adding more of a briny solution every 30 to 40 minutes or so. This will keep adding much needed moisture back into our meat and help reinforce our flavoring. At this point, we've been cooking for about 2 hours, and as you can see, this is really starting to look like barbecue, but we've got a ways to go, and I don't want to bore you with that, so all I'll be doing is continue to monitor this thing and add more Sal Muera as needed, and really that's going to mean every 30 to 40 minutes or so. Okay, we've skipped ahead and we're about 6 hours through our cook time here. And as you can see, guys, it's starting to get dark out. And so while the top section isn't quite finished, the bottom sections of this thing definitely are ready. The beauty is that you can actually cut out pieces and serve them while leaving the rest cooking. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we've removed a few pieces from the bottom and brought them to our little workstation, and it's time to cut in. Now, as you can see, our fat has rendered down, there's a crispy crust that we've formed, and we've got a gorgeous, gorgeous smoke ring. The meat is very tender, and while the poor lighting doesn't show it, this thing is juicier than it looks. So let's bring it inside and serve it up. Now, once you've transported around 4 or so pounds inside, you'll want to cut this into more manageable pieces, and to prove to you that this thing is as juicy as I say, well, just look at this cross section and the squeeze. That is exactly what we want. And listen, this was traditionally a rustic gaucho style of cooking. It's not going to be the prettiest thing you'll ever serve, and it's not meant to be. It's meant to be simple and bring people together, which in this case includes around 20 family members that you can't see in the background who we need to feed. Of course, before I actually share any of this, I'm going to take the first bite. So grab yourself a plate, gently place a singular rib down on said plate before grabbing a fork and knife for some unknown reason and cutting off a piece and impatiently jamming it into your mouth. And what can I say? It's a well-marbled beef rib that's been simply seasoned and caringly, nay, lovingly cooked over a fire and smoked for 6 hours. So you bet your sweet butt cheeks this thing is goddamn delicious. It's got that rich beef flavor you expect from a short rib with a surprising tenderness and forward smoky flavor that is undeniably amazing. And there we have Costillar a la Cruz. It's delicious and amazing, and I hope you have a chance to try it at some point in your future. It's just a really worthwhile experience. Guys, that's really it. That's all there is to say. So thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. As always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.